I'm sorry, Leela. I took the money. I can't do this. Don't look for me. She read the text message twice. Slowly, she put the phone in her bag, walked out of the marriage registrar. Outside, she called him. She placed it on a loudspeaker. It rang out, but no answer. She called again. It instantly switched her to voicemail. She cut the call and switched to the message icon on her phone and typed, "Joseph, call me back right now." The message ticked 2 blue ticks. She stood on that pavement in a white wedding dress with nowhere to go and nothing left when she heard a man nearby explode into his phone. "She's gone. Dong Li is going to destroy me. The merger is in 3 hours and he has no wife at that table." Leela turned and looked at the man, then looked down at her dress. Without a second thought, she walked straight up to him. "Your bride disappeared?" she blurted. He spun around. "Excuse me?" "I just got abandoned in there. This was meant to be my day." She pointed at the registrar. "I'm already dressed. I have nothing to go back to. I'll stand in for the bride that already disappeared." He stared at her. "You don't even know who he is." "I don't need to. I need a roof and he needs a wife. Tell me I'm wrong." He opened his mouth, closed it. His phone rang again. He looked at the screen. It was Dong Li, and looked back at Leela like she was either the best or worst decision of his life. "Don't move," he warned. He stepped away, answered, spoke in a low, urgent voice. Leela stood still, heart steady, mind already made up. He came back. "He'll see you, but I need your name." "Leela Mensa." "Any legal issues?" the man asked. "None." "Prior marriages?" "Almost one." He almost smiled. "Come with me." Before we continue, I want to know that you are welcome to Miss Afro-Korean Stories. Hit subscribe, drop a thumbs up, and tell us in the comments. We want to know who is in the room. Now, back to Leela, because she is walking into a world she is completely unprepared for. So grab your popcorn and juice. The car that came was black, silent, and moved through traffic like it owned the road. Lila sat in the back, watching the city shift around her, the streets getting wider, the buildings taller, the air feeling different the further they drove from the registrar. Mr. Choi, that was his name, he had introduced himself stiffly, sat beside her with a tablet, briefing her fast. His name is Dong Li. He runs Li Capital, construction, real estate, private investment across 4 countries. The merger he is closing today requires a stable personal image. His original bride walked out this morning. You are the replacement. You speak only when spoken to in his presence until he tells you otherwise. You do not ask about his business. You do not approach his daughter without permission. He has a daughter? Ara, 7 years old. She is not your concern. Lila nodded slowly, filed that away. The car stopped. She stepped out and looked up. The building was the kind that made you feel small on purpose. Dong Li was already standing when she walked in. There were no warm greetings, just dark eyes that moved over her, assessing, like he was reading a document rather than looking at a person. "You're the one who volunteered?" he said. "Yes," Lila replied. "Why would you sell your freedom?" "Because I had nothing to lose." He studied her face like he was checking for a lie hiding somewhere in it. "This is not a marriage," he said. "It is a contract. You attend what I require. You sign what is necessary. You say nothing that is not agreed upon. When it is over, you walk away. Clean." "And what do I receive?" Lila asked. He tilted his head slightly, like the question caught him off guard, like people didn't usually ask him that. "Name it. What do you want?" "Somewhere to live, a monthly payment, and enough time under your name to rebuild what I lost this morning." He looked at her for a long moment, then walked to the desk, picked up a pen, slid a document across to her. "Sign. We will marry in 1 hour." Leela picked up the pen. Her hand didn't shake as she slid her name on the contract. The ceremony had 4 people and a signature. No flowers, no vows that meant anything, just an officiant reading words into a quiet room while 2 strangers stood close enough to look convincing. When it was done, Dong Li straightened his jacket and turned to Mr. Choi. "Have her things moved to the east wing by evening." He walked out without looking at her. Leela stood there holding her copy of the marriage certificate, still in the same white dress she had worn for a different man in a different life just hours ago. She folded the document carefully, put it in her bag. "All right," she thought. "Let's see what this becomes." The mansion was not what she expected. She had expected cold, chrome and glass, and the kind of silence that feels hostile. What she got was something more unsettling. It was beautiful. Warm wood, high ceilings, soft lighting along the hallways. A home that looked like someone had once cared deeply about it. and then stopped. A housekeeper named Hannah showed her to the east wing. The room was large, clean, a window that looked out over a private garden. "Dinner's at 7, Hannah said. "Mr. Lee eats alone. Yours will be brought here." "Every night?" Leela asked. Hannah nodded. "Those are the instructions, Mrs. Leela." Leela set her bag on the bed, looked around the room. Somewhere in this house, a 7-year-old girl was living with a father who had just married a stranger. She wondered what Ara knew. She wondered what Dong Lee was hiding. And somewhere underneath all of it, she wondered what Joseph was doing right now, whether he had spent the money he stole from her yet, whether he had felt even 1 second of guilt in him. She sat on the edge of the bed. "This is your life now," she told herself. "Make it count." She heard footsteps approaching the door. Leela turned. A little girl stood in the doorway, a 7-year-old girl with gorgeous eyes, her silky hair pulled back neatly, wearing a red dress like she had somewhere important to be. She was staring at Leela with the kind of open, unfiltered curiosity that only children carry. "Are you the new wife?" the girl asked. Leela blinked, then smiled slowly. "I am." "Are you gonna leave like the last one?" she asked in her little voice. "I don't plan to," Leela said carefully, not wanting to hurt her. The girl considered this, then stepped 1 foot into the room like she was testing the ground. "I'm Ara. What's your name?" she asked. "I'm Leela," Leela responded with a warm smile. Ara looked around the room, then back at Leela. "Your dress is pretty." "Thank you. Your dress is prettier." Ara looked down at her red dress and smiled. From down the hall, Hannah's voice came sharp and fast. "Ara, your father said—" I know. Ara took 1 step back, but before she turned, she looked at Leela 1 more time, like she was memorizing something. Then she was gone. Leela sat quietly for a moment after that. Something about that little girl made the whole arrangement feel heavier, more real, like there was stakes here she hadn't been told about yet. Down the hall, she heard a door close, and then silence. The next morning came quietly. Leela was up before 7. She had barely slept, not because the bed was uncomfortable, it wasn't, but because her mind wouldn't stop thinking. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Joseph's name on her screen. 2 blue ticks, no reply from him. She splashed water on her face, dressed simply, and walked out into the hallway. The mansion was different in the morning, lighter, the kind of house that almost felt normal until you remembered why you were in it. She found the kitchen. Hannah was already there, moving efficiently between the counter and the stove. "Good morning, Hannah," Leela greeted. Hannah looked up, nodded once at her greeting. "Mr. Lee has already eaten. Ara is in the garden playing." Leela poured herself a cup of coffee and looked out the window. Ara was outside, sitting cross-legged on the grass, talking to a small potted plant like it was a person. Leela smiled at the wonderful view. She didn't plan to go outside, but 10 minutes later she was standing in the garden, coffee in hand, watching Ara explain something very seriously to the plant. "What are you telling it?" Leela asked from behind. Ara looked up. She was surprised, like she had known Leela would come. "I'm telling it to grow faster. Hannah says it won't listen, but I think it just needs someone to talk to it." Leela crouched down beside her. "What kind of plant is it?" "I don't know. Papa got it for me, but he didn't say what it was." Ara tilted her head. "He doesn't explain things a lot." Leela looked at the plant. "I think it's listening," Leela said from behind. Ara looked at her with wide eyes. "You think so?" "I do," Leela nodded at her. Ara turned back to the plant with renewed confidence. "See? She thinks so too. So grow fast, okay?" Leela laughed so hard. She didn't notice Dong Lee standing at the far end of the garden watching them until she stood up and turned around. He was holding a phone at his side, still dressed for the office, expression unreadable. Their eyes met briefly. He looked away first and walked back inside. Ara found Leela everywhere, at breakfast, in the hallway, outside in the garden, and every time Leela stopped what she was doing and gave the girl her full attention. Hannah noticed it. "She doesn't warm up to people," Hannah said one afternoon, folding laundry near the doorway while Leela helped Ara with a puzzle on the living room floor. Not since her mother left. She was only 4. She stopped talking to strangers after that. Leela looked up. "How long ago was that?" 3 years. Pause. Mr. Lee tried, but he doesn't know how to be soft. He knows how to talk to her or smooth her. Lila looked back at Ara, who was frowning deeply at a puzzle piece that refused to fit in. It goes there, Lila said gently, pointing. Ara tried it. It clicked. She threw both hands up like she had won something enormous. Dong Lee started coming home earlier. He never said why, but where he used to return at 9 or 10 at night, now it was 7, sometimes 6:30. He would walk past the living room, pause at the doorway, just long enough to see Ara laughing at something Lila had said, and then continue upstairs. One evening, Mr. Choi mentioned it casually in the car on the way back from an event Lila had attended on Dong Lee's arm. "Mr. Dong Lee watches you," Mr. Choi said. "I know he does," Lila said, looking out the window. "He is someone who doesn't trust easily." "I'm not asking him to," Lila curtly said. Mr. Choi was quiet for a moment. That might be exactly why he's starting to. He muttered that to himself as he drove her home. Lila had been in the house for 3 weeks. She had settled into the rhythms of it. Ara's morning chatter, Hannah's quiet efficiency, Dong Lee's controlled silences at the rare dinner they shared. She had almost started to feel something close to comfortable. She was looking for a pen and went into Dong Lee's study, which she had been told was off limits, but whose door had been left open when she saw the folder on the table. She wouldn't have touched it, but the folder was open on the desk, and the name on the top document was one she knew better than her own. Isaac Mensah. Her father's name. She stopped breathing for a second. Then she picked it up. It was a legal document, a business acquisition record dated 6 years ago. Lee Capital had moved against a small construction firm, cutting off contracts, freezing partnerships, filing disputes that buried the company in legal fees it couldn't survive. The company was her father's. Her hands were shaking by the second, not from fear, from something hotter than that. She kept reading. The strategy had been deliberate. Someone at Lee Capital had identified Isaac Mensah's firm as a competitor blocking a key land acquisition and had dismantled it piece by piece over 18 months. By the time it was done, her father had lost everything, the business, their house, and eventually his freedom, when a desperate decision landed him in a courtroom facing charges he couldn't afford to fight properly. Lila set the folder down. She stood in the middle of Dong Lee's study, in Dong Lee's house, wearing the name Dong Lee had given her, and she felt she betrayed her dad. She walked back to her room, closed the door, sat on the bed. Her father was in prison, and the man who had put him there was asleep upstairs. She left the next morning before anyone was awake. She took a taxi across the city, watching the streets blur past the window, thinking nothing because her mind was blank at the moment. The visiting room smelled like disinfectant and stuffing air. She sat across from her father with a thick panel of glass between them. Isaac Mensah had aged in ways that had nothing to do with time. His eyes were still sharp, though. He picked up the phone on his side. She picked up hers. "Lila?" His voice was calm and weak, like he already knew something was wrong. "Tell me about Lee Capital," she said immediately, intentionally forgetting to greet. There was silence from her father's end. "Papa." Her voice was cold as she called out again. "Tell me the truth, all of it," she insisted. He exhaled slowly, looked down at the table between them, then back up at her. "How did you find out?" he asked. "Does it matter?" she replied. He was quiet for a long moment. "Dong Lee didn't do it alone," Isaac finally said. "There was a board decision, but he signed off on it. He knew what it would do to us, and he signed anyway." He paused. "I was in the way of something he wanted. That was all I was to him, an obstacle." Lila's jaw tightened. "And the charges?" she asked. "The court case?" "When the business collapsed, I made a bad decision. Tried to recover money that wasn't mine to move. That part, that was on me." He looked at her directly. "But I wouldn't have been in that position if he hadn't destroyed everything first." Lila sat with that for a moment. "I'm living in his house," she said quietly. Her father's eyes widened. "What?" "It's a long story, Dad." She shook her head. "But I'm there. I have access. I have his trust. Or I will have his trust." She smirked mischievously. Isaac leaned forward. "Lila," he called out. He could already read his daughter's thoughts. "I'm not leaving," she said, and the way she said it left no room for argument. "But I'm not staying for the same reason I arrived." Her father stared at her through the glass. His daughter, who had always been too stubborn for her own good, too brave for anyone's comfort. "Be careful." That was all he could say. "I will," Lila assured. She stood up, put the phone back, and walked out of that visiting room a completely different woman than the one who had walked in earlier. She walked back into that mansion like nothing had changed. Same quiet steps, same polite nod to Hannah, same warm smile for Ara when the little girl came running down the hallway to meet her. You were gone, Ara said, grabbing her hand. I looked for you at breakfast. I had somewhere to be, honey. Lila squeezed her hand. But I'm back now. Ara studied her face. Are you sad? No, baby, Lila smiled. I'm focused and very happy. Lila was careful after that. Every conversation with Dong Li became a tool. Every dinner they shared, she used it to learn from him. The way he thought, the way he made decisions, what he valued the most, what he feared the most. And slowly, it worked. You're different from what I had expected, he said one evening. They were sitting in the living room after Ara had gone to bed. He had a glass of water. She had a book she hadn't been reading. What did you expect? She asked. Someone who would want more than the agreement offered, he said. I don't think it works on men like you, she said simply. He was quiet for a moment. Then what does? She turned a page she hadn't read. Patience, she said. She found what she needed 3 days later. Not in the study this time, in a conversation she wasn't supposed to hear. Dong Li on a call in the hallway outside her room, voice low but not low enough. He was talking about Jill, a rival company that had been circling Li Capital for months. And in the conversation, Dong Li mentioned a specific private acquisition deal he had secretly sent to the company to bring him down. Lila stood by the doorway and typed everything into her phone as he talked. The moment the call ended, she walked up to her room. She sat on her bed with the phone in her hands for a long time. This was what she needed. This was the lever. Hand this to Jill and they would use it to tear Li Capital apart from the inside. Dong Li would lose the board's confidence, lose the empire he had built on the rubble of her father's life. It was exactly what she had waited for, patiently and planned. She opened her contacts, found the number Mr. Choi had never known she had, typed the message, attached the voiceover. Her thumb hovered over the send button. For a while. From down the hall, she heard Ara laughing at something. That light, unguarded laugh that the little girl had started doing more of in the last few weeks. Lila pressed send anyway. She told herself it was justice, that it was what her father deserved, that Dong Li had made his choices, and now he would live with the consequences the way Isaac had lived with his. She told herself that for 4 days. Then, Ara sat beside her on the garden bench one afternoon and said, without looking up from the flowers she was holding, Papa cried once. I saw him. He didn't know I was there watching him. She turned the flower slowly in her fingers. He was looking at a photo. I didn't recognize the person's face, but the person was so dark. She said, he said sorry to the photo countless times, like the photo could hear him speak. Leela was quiet and couldn't talk. Did he know you saw? She asked carefully. No, I just said that now, Ara looked up. Papa doesn't like people seeing when he's vulnerable. People think he's a hard-dyed man, but he isn't. He just doesn't know how to say them out loud. Leela looked at the little girl beside her, 7-year-old little girl, carrying more emotional intelligence than most adults she had ever met. Ara, she chose her words slowly, has your papa ever talked to you about his mistakes? Ara got about it. He said once that he made a decision a long time ago that he wishes he could undo. He said sometimes being powerful makes you forget that other people are real and can get hurt. She looked back at the flower. I didn't really understand it then, but I think I do now. Leela said nothing, but something inside her had started to come apart. The thought of whether she made the right decision or not. The attack came on a Thursday. Jill moved fast and hard, exactly the way Leela had known they would. By morning, the story was out. The silent partner, the private deal, leaked to 3 financial outlets simultaneously. By noon, Li Capital's board had called an emergency meeting. By evening, Dong Li's phone hadn't stopped ringing once. Leela watched it all from the edges of the house on the TV, waiting. But the guilt had already arrived before the consequences did. He found her in the study that night. She was sitting in the chair by the window when he walked in. He didn't turn on the light, just stood in the doorway, and even in the darkness, she could see that something in him had broken open. It was you, wasn't it? He asked. He asked in a tone that made it he was sure about it. Leela didn't look away. Yes, it was. He walked in slowly, sat across from her, and what she expected was rage. Cold, devastating rage. The kind of anger that men like Dong Li weaponized. What she got was something worse. He just looked at her. Tired. like someone who had been waiting for this moment and hated that it had finally arrived. "Why?" he asked. "Isaac Mensa," she said. "He's my father." The name landed like a stone dropped into still water. She watched the ripples move across his face. "Leela." "He lost everything." Her voice was steady, but her hands weren't. "The business you dismantled, the case he couldn't afford to fight, the years he has been sitting in that prison." She leaned forward. "That was my family. That was my life. And you signed the papers without blinking." Dong Li was silent for a long moment. "I know," he said. She blanked. "What?" "I know what I did." He looked down at his hands. "I knew even then, but the acquisition was worth more to me than the consequences to someone I had never met." He paused. "I told myself it was business, that it was legal, that he would recover." Another pause. "I told myself a lot of things." Leela stared at him. "I have looked for ways to correct it, quietly. I had my legal team review his case twice. I tried to set up an anonymous fund for his legal fees, but he refused it. He never knew where it came from, but he refused it." He looked up at her. "I am not telling you this to excuse what I did. There is no excuse. I am telling you because you deserve to know I haven't been sleeping well either." The room was very quiet. "You destroyed my family," she softened. "I did," he said, "and I am sorry about it." Dong Li fought back Jill with everything he had. It turned out the information Leela had leaked was damaging, but Dong Li had been building a counter-strategy for months, anticipating that someone would eventually come for him. He released a stronger file, more cleaner evidence, Bak Jill's own hidden violations, documented and ready. Within a week, it was Bak Jill's board that was collapsing, not Lee Capital's. Dong Li had won. But he didn't celebrate it. He just narrowly escaped. 3 days after the confrontation, there was a knock on Leela's door. She opened it. Dong Li stood there holding a thick legal envelope. "I had my team prepare a full submission for your father's case," he said. "New legal representation. Full funded by me, openly this time, and a formal statement accepting responsibility for the business practices that contributed to his financial collapse." He held it out. "It won't erase the time he has lost, but it may reduce what remains." Leela took the envelope, looked down at it. "I think this is the right thing to do to deserve your forgiveness when I ask for it." He paused. "And because Ara would be ashamed of me if I didn't do this." Leela looked up at him. And for the first time since she had walked into his life in a white dress with nothing to lose, she saw him. Not the power, not the cold control, just a man who had made a terrible mistake and had been living inside it ever since and wanted to redeem himself. Isaac Mensa's case was reviewed. The new submission changed things significantly. A reduced sentence was approved. A release date was set. 8 months away, but set. Leela sat across from her father in the visiting room and told him everything, all of it. He listened without interrupting, which was how she knew he was taking it seriously. When she finished, he was quiet for a long time. "Do you love him?" he asked. "I don't know yet," she said honestly, "but I think I want to find out what I feel." Her father nodded slowly. "Then find out." The three of them started having dinner together. Ara sat between them, talking enough for all three, filling every silence with something alive. Dong Li is learning, slowly, how to sit in a moment without needing to control it. Leela learns that the line between revenge and understanding is thinner than anyone tells you. One evening, Ara fell asleep on the sofa between them. Neither of them moved to carry her to bed immediately. They just sat there in the quiet. Dong Li on one side, Leela on the other, Ara's small, steady breathing between them. "I didn't expect this," Dong Li said quietly. "Neither did I," Leela said. He looked at her. "I'm glad you walked up to Mr. Choi that day." She almost smiled. "He looked like he needed some saving." "Actually, he did." "So did I," Leela replied. It was a Sunday morning, garden, sunlight coming through the trees, soft and unhurried. Ara was chasing something, a butterfly probably, across the grass, laughing at nothing and probably everything. Dong Li stood beside Leela watching her. Then he turned to her. "I want this to be real," he said. "Not a contract, not an arrangement." He looked at her like she was the only thing she could see. "I want to try properly with you." Leela looked at him for a long moment. Across the garden, Iris spun around with her arms out wide, laughing at the sky. Okay, Leela said. Okay? Okay. She looked at him. But you have to learn how to explain things. Iris says you don't explain things enough. Like emotions, Leela said. I'll learn, he said. Here's what this story leaves behind. Revenge feels like power until you are holding it, and then it just feels like more pain dressed in a different coat. What healed Leela wasn't destroying Dong Li, it was understanding him. What changed Dong Li wasn't losing, it was being truly seen by someone who had every reason to hate him, but chose differently. Second chances don't erase what happened. They don't rewrite the past, but they build something on top of it, something that wouldn't exist without the weight of everything that came before it. Love is not always the feeling that arrives first. Sometimes it is the one that remains after everything else has burned away. And that is the end of Leela and Dong Li's story. Now I want to hear from you. What did you feel watching this unfold? Did you think Leela should have walked away? Did Dong Li deserve his second chance? Drop everything in the comments. Your thoughts, your verdict, your feelings. We read every single one. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Hit that thumbs up, and if you are not subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? There are more stories like this one coming, and you do not want to miss them. We will see you in the next one. Thank you for watching. Kisses.